We're about ready to get started. If we could get all our senators to come on in. He's campaigning.
Senator Ide.
Senator Ide, I think we're about ready to get started.
Senator Ide.
Senator Ide is present.
Is Senator Ide, I think we're ready to get started whenever you are. Okay, the committee will please come to order. I would ask that any sidebar conversations take place out in the hallway so that we can give all of our bills a good hearing. And so we will ask our good secretary, Linda, to call the roll.
Senator French,
Here.
Senator Hicks,
Excused.
Senator Ide,
Here.
Senator Kolb,
Present.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Here. Thank you,
You're
Linda.
welcome, thank you.
All right, well, welcome everybody to the Senate Ag Committee. We have a couple bills for our consideration tonight. I just wanted to go through a few things to kick the rust off since we haven't been here for a year and since some of us are all new. Linda and I both are new to this committee and this process. So we'd like you to make sure your cell phones are off and that all comments and questions come through the chairman, and we will change my sign by next meeting. And please state your name and the organization you're with. For future reference, any handouts or Zoom coming in by Zoom, that needs to be done by noon on the day before our committee meeting starts. I don't think we have anyone on Zoom today, and we would let them in if they were because we haven't noticed that before. However, we would like your registration via Zoom if you're going to testify that way by noon on the day before our meeting. So tonight, we are going to start with Senate File 29, brucellosis management updates, and Senator French will take us through this bill. Go ahead, Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me, Madam Chairman. Committee, this is Senate File 29, brucellosis management updates. It's sponsored by the Joint Agricultural, State, and Public Lands and Water Resources Interim Committee. And I'm going to read through this. It's short, so I'll be quick, but I'm going to read every line of it. It won't take long. Is an act for relating to agriculture, livestock, and other animals, amending the requirement to distinctly brand a livestock animal following a positive brucellosis test to be discretionary, updating the provisions for brucellosis testing of cattle, modifying the documentation requirements to receive compensation for brucellosis testing, requiring rulemaking and providing for effective dates. Be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming, Section 1, Wyoming Statute 11-19-401 and 11-19-407 A and C are amended to read 11-19-401, tagging, branding, and disposition of cattle reacting to test, penalties for failure to comply. On page 2, starting on line 2, all livestock animals in Wyoming reacting to a confirmatory test for brucellosis, many of us know it as Bang's disease. In shall is scratched out and inserted is may, be immediately permanently branded with a hot iron, letter B, on the left tailhead by or in the presence of an officially authorized veterinarian. All such reactor animals, livestock animals, shall be disposed of for slaughter or diagnostic purposes only, upon and according to written instruction from the Wyoming Livestock Board. Any person who violates any provisions of this section shall be punished as provided in Wyoming Statute 11-1-103. As used in this section, confirmatory test means a test for brucellosis that has the specificity and sensitivity to verify the presence or absence of Brucella abortus in animal serum or tissues, and is used to confirm results from an initial brucellosis test. 11-19-407 brucellosis testing program. On line 19, A, the Livestock Board shall develop a brucellosis surveillance program in any designated surveillance area as defined by the Livestock Board, and any temporary surveillance. Now that's added, any temporary surveillance area designated by the board. You'll see there on 22 that of concern is gone. Temporary surveillance area designated by the board and approved by the governor as an area where risk of exposure to documented infected wildlife is of concern. The program may be conducted with the help of veterinary practitioners and livestock auction markets. This program shall provide for the testing of livestock for brucellosis, for spaying heifers, and for adult vaccinations only to the extent that may be reasonably necessary to maintain or to regain the brucellosis-free status of the state of Wyoming. Compensation under this program for all purposes except mandatory testing or testing within a temporary surveillance area as designated by the board and approved by the governor shall be pursuant to the terms of a brucellosis mitigation plan that has been entered into between the livestock producer and the Wyoming State Veterinarian. So you'll see on line 9 that this little bit of typo stuff. "And" is gone, and a temporary surveillance is added. And then after the area then of concern is deleted. Then you go down there to line 12. Livestock herd is removed and added as brucellosis mitigation plan that has been entered into between the livestock producer and the Wyoming State Veterinarian.
Senator French?
Yes.
I think that works really well, where you're taking us to the changes. So maybe if you could just go over the changes with us, and then we wouldn't make you read the entire statute. Would that work?
Thank you. I'm getting a dry mouth. Much appreciated. So going on down through on page 3, at the bottom, line 23, a change after animal is "and" is added in there. Next page, page 4. Very first word "and" is deleted. On line 2, submission to is deleted, and receipt by is added. Line 3, after "of," that line is removed. Line 4 is removed. Line 5 is removed. Line 6 through location is removed, and added is documentation in the format and manner specified by board rule. And that is pretty much the bill, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator French. And next, I think we'd like to hear from the agency to come up and give us their justification and let us know the good reason they have for making these changes.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Yes.
Dr. Hallie Hazel, Wyoming State Veterinarian from the Wyoming Livestock Board.
Welcome.
The verbiage of this bill is extremely pleasing to us, and it was written in part to update the language that was previously considered an area of concern. When that verbiage has been used for our surrounding states, they obviously become concerned. So we have changed that to a temporary surveillance area, which isn't quite as kind of concerning, I guess you might say, to our surrounding states, but it does indicate that that's an area that has an increased epidemiologic risk for disease that we're watching and doing extra surveillance in. And also that allows us to use a temporary surveillance as terminology for other areas that we are looking at as areas that have increased testing as well. And also we've updated this to reflect the verbiage that we use for our herd plans, which is a brucellosis mitigation plan, which just reflects the fact that we are trying to prevent brucellosis in those herds versus just a livestock herd plan. And one other item to note is that we have removed the requirements for notarization, which was previously required for our reimbursement. We're removing that requirement. It is not something that is currently practiced, and it's also very difficult for our rural practitioners to find a notary when they're actually working on these reimbursement plans. And we'll be doing things in electronic format and submitted things through electronic signature instead.
Okay.
Are there any questions that I may address?
Questions from the committee? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Is there any chance, or I guess minimize the chance of fraud by people not doing what the last procedures were for certification? Do you feel like you have that covered adequately to make sure that people won't abuse the system, if that's possible?
Chairman Steinmetz, Senator Kolb, we are able to avoid the issue of fraud because part of the documentation that we are requiring is the laboratory final report from the laboratory. And that final report is based on the number of samples submitted to the lab, and it comes directly to us from the lab. So there isn't really an opportunity for fraud at that point.
Good. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this bill? Please come forward.
Madam Chairman, Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. Just want to add that we've been involved in discussion with producers regarding these changes, and we feel, based on the many years of experience, unfortunately, that we've all had to have had with the brucellosis issue, and what we've learned from that we think these minor changes will help to facilitate the process and allow it to function in a manner that's more acceptable to our producers. With that, we support this legislation as it's been presented.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this bill? Anyone else? Any Farm Bureau?
Madam Chairman, excuse me, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, sitting in support of this bill. It's the right direction to go. And with that, I'm trying to be uncharacteristically brief. You're going to have to hear a lot from me this session. So with that, I would sit for any questions you or the committee may have.
Any questions? All right. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. All right. Is there any participation on Zoom? No one on Zoom? Seeing that, we will ask you, committee, what is your pleasure? Would anyone like to move the bill?
Move the bill.
Second.
Moved by Kolb, seconded by French. And so we'll go ahead and work the bill. Let's go through the bill page by page and see if there are any amendments, just to kick the rest off. Any amendments on page 1? Amendments on page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Seeing we have no amendments, committee, is there any discussion on the bill? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I obviously I'm new to the committee here, new to the Senate. I just wanted to, I guess, ask a question that show my ignorance to the system here. But how were these amendments originated? Where were they? Who was responsible for drafting those amendments? That's all I wanted, just kind of get a question answered there.
Okay,
Yeah.
Senator Ide,
Thank
that would
you.
be great. Could we have the agency come up and tell us where the amendments originated? Dr. Hayes, is it?
Dr. Hallie Hazel.
Hazel.
Steinmetz.
I didn't write it correctly. I apologize. Thank you for coming back up. Could you answer that question for us?
Absolutely, Chairman Steinmetz, thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Hallie Hazel, Wyoming State Veterinarian. Regarding the amendments, these were developed in conjunction with concern from our producers and our veterinarians and recommended by the Wyoming Livestock Board to be made to this statute.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does that,
Yes.
Senator Ide? Okay, and the Livestock Board is a board of producers, so I appreciate that they have been involved in this process.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Any further discussion from the committee? All right, public comment and discussion is closed. We will have Linda go ahead and call the roll if you're ready. Oh, excuse me, we have one more thing. We checked for that and we didn't have anyone online. We still don't have anyone online, correct? All right, thank you for reminding me though. All right, we'll go ahead and call the roll.
Senator French?
Aye.
Aye. Senator Hicks? Oh,
Excused.
excused. Senator Ide?
Aye.
Aye. Senator Kolb?
Aye.
Aye. Chairman Steinmetz?
Aye.
Okay, there are 4 ayes, 1 excused.
The bill passes with 4 ayes. That's the majority of the committee, so we won't leave the vote open since we have a majority. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 73, Lawful Fences, and Senator Kolb will be presenting that bill for us today.
Madam Chair, would you like me just to go through the bill as we have here in committee, then do the amendments second?
Yes, Senator Kolb, and then we'll, you could explain the amendment if you would like to. And then when we move the bill, we'll go ahead and work the amendment if we choose to take it up. Yes.
Sorry, on the last bill, who will be presenting that to the floor?
Senator French will present. Thank you for that reminder. Take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll just hit the changes, and on page 2, up on line 7, the word animals has been struck and replaced with livestock. And then on the preceding fine changes, they've been updated from, let's see, guilty of a misdemeanor, fines not less than $5 was changed to $150. And no more than $750. For each subsequent offense, the fine shall not be less than, change from $25 to $750, and not more than $3,000. And I'll just go through the whole bill as it is, Madam Chair, and I'll go back and do the amendment if it passes or gets discussion. Down on page 3, line, I guess that's one of the amendments. Page 3, line 4, there's the language has been added basically to clean up the ambiguity or make it more clear about the cost of said adjoining fence. So it says, except an adjoining landowner to a subdivision shall only be required to pay for half of the actual cost to construct and maintain a lawful fence as described in 1128-102A, and the subdivider shall pay any additional costs of the construction and maintenance of the perimeter partition fence that exceed the requirements of a lawful fence. It goes on to make a change or an insertion on line 13, adding breach of the perimeter partition fence. Move on to page 4. Line 1, and I guess, except as provided by Wyoming State Statute 1128-106B for liability regarding the perimeter partition fence on subdivisions. That was inserted in there. And that's just a language change. I'll just briefly explain during the interim that This was to improve the situation or clarify the situation probably more accurately about what kind of fence is required between a subdivision and agricultural use. And the past language merely said half of the fence that was put up by the subdivision. And that would, of course, lead people liable for, maybe $100 a foot fence as opposed to the legal minimum fence, which may be $10. I'm just throwing those numbers out as a ratio. So this would more accurately define the change that subdivisions basically can put up a fence that they like, but the adjacent landowner is only responsible for half of a legal fence that is necessary. Now, would you want, that explains the bill, Madam Chair. I can answer any questions.
Does the committee have any questions for Senator Kolb? Go ahead and, go ahead.
Ask one quick question. So if you have, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Steinmetz, Madam Chair Steinmetz. On that, so if you have a developer and he decides to put a fence up for his development, and then you have an agricultural operator on the other side of that. So the developer can decide what kind of fence he wants to put up, and it could be very expensive, and it's not something the ag operator would want. But he's only liable, the ag operator, for half of what's legally required. And what is that? What is legally required? Where do you find out what that means as far as the fence goes? Like a barbed wire fence, is that legally required, or?
I think more accurately, it's what is sufficient to deal with the animals that are being restrained.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ide. And Senator Kolb, could you go through the amendment you're proposing then? Or unless you have more to add?
No, Madam Chair, I'm prepared.
Okay.
So I kind of tracked in the amendment, so it's a little easier to read. I believe it'll start off on page 2, line 23, and after the word construction, add in and maintenance. It would read the construction and maintenance of a perimeter partition fence on any part of the subdivision adjacent to lands upon which livestock can be legally run at large. The next change would be on page 3, line 3. And where the word parties are used, insert subdivider. And that would just basically say, shall be paid for by the subdivider. And I took a little liberty, Madam Chair, with the amendment that I had received. And I believe that the end of line 3, the word in would be stricken. Then everything from 4 to line 9 would be stricken. And then line 10 on same said page 3, strike that exceed the requirements of the lawful fence.
Senator Kolb, so you're saying there would be a period after subdivider?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, so that is the proposed amendment, and when we work the bill, we'll go back to that. Could you tell us what in essence your amendment does? Just explain what the amendment actually does.
Oh, well, yes, Madam Chair. I didn't hear the first part of what you said. This amendment basically strikes the requirement of the adjacent, of the adjacent landowner to the subdivider. It strikes the requirement of that adjacent landowner, number one, owning the fence, and then being responsible for the maintenance of the fence, and it puts the onus of the fence upon the subdivider. Personally, I think that makes a lot of sense because the person who put the fence up obviously should put up a fence that would do what it needs to do. And if they fail to do such a thing, that responsibility is upon the person who erected the fence, i.e. the subdivider. not the adjacent landowner. And that's really what this does. That's the intent.
Okay, thank you, Senator Kolb. Are there any questions on the amendment? Senator French?
Madam Chairman, just a comment in support of Senator Kolb. You know, if a rancher or farmer has an existing fence and the property next to him is subdivided, and that rancher has had a good barbed wire fence or sheep fence or whatever to keep his animals in, and somebody comes next door and subdivides, they shouldn't have to pay a part of that fence the subdivider puts up. I mean, they've got a good fence, so they shouldn't have to incur any further cost. Just a comment.
Okay, thank you, Senator French. So with that, committee, I think we'll go to public test unless Senator Hicks has a question for
Mr.
Senator Kolb.
Chairman, Madam Chairman, on the amendment,
Would you turn your microphone on? Thank you.
on the amendment, listening to the explanation is the subdivider would be responsible for it, but that's not the way I read the language right now. So if you go to page 3, line 2, and you start with the sentence, and it says, the cost of the perimeter partition fence shall be paid for by the parties, which is one entity, and the subdivider. So I'm not sure, without looking at all this, as who the parties are, but to me, it infers that there's more responsibility from people out there than just the subdivider. Am I reading that wrong? After construction,
Senator Hicks, I believe on page 3, line 3, we're striking parties in and inserting subdivider. So it says paid for by the subdivider.
okay.
Does that clarify?
Yep, no,
Okay.
I got it tracked in now. Okay.
All right, committee, are we ready for public testimony? All right, let's take public testimony. Who would like to be first to testify on this bill? Okay, come on forward. You can be first. You're right in the front of the room. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, committee, for hearing this. My name is Lois Van Mark, and my family owns and operates a dryland wheat farm in Goshen County. We've been there for just about 100 years. And subsequently, we've also added sunflowers. We are 100% dryland. And we have noticed in Goshen County recently, that, by the way, you've got a little handout here, but I'm here to ask you to amend, and I think Senator Kolb has already addressed this, in the statute 1128-106, subparagraphs A and subparagraph B indicate that the adjacent landowner is responsible for half of a subdivision fence. And I've became painfully aware of this in 2022 because I got 2 letters throughout the year from 2 different people, miles apart, who had purchased land and were going to build a fence around their property. One of them he's not an agricultural producer, he's just 140 acres, wants to have a house with some cows. And so he just sends me the bill and says, by the way, pay the fencer. And I did not do that. I have waited until the fence is finished. Fence has been finished now. And I'm waiting to have him send me an invoice. And I will pay him. But I think that I appreciate so much what the committee is doing, because I just don't think a landowner who is farming, particularly from the perspective of cropping, frankly, a fence is a problem for us. It's a weed patch. Our sprayer booms that are 110 feet wide, they get caught in the fence. No matter how good your GPS is, that happens. And we didn't initiate the project. It's not ours. And I don't have it's plopped in my lap. I don't know how long he's gonna wait before he'll take me to civil court, which is his option. So I guess I appreciate and applaud your efforts in taking the responsibility of paying for the perimeter fence and putting it on the subdivider. Now, I do have one question. I took this issue to the Wyoming Wheat Grower Association, and we talked about it at their annual meeting recently, and a question was asked, what is a subdivision? Because in Goshen County, we're seeing lots of versions of that. Like there's 120 acres bought out in the middle of a wheat field versus a development of housing. And that may be defined somewhere else, I don't know. But I had not heard an answer to that, and I just wanted to throw it out to make you aware of it. Thank you for your time, I really appreciate it.
Committee, are there any questions? Okay, well, thank you, Lois.
Thank you.
And we will look that up and make sure that's clarified, that I know that we've got a lot of things dealing with subdivisions. And so I think we would probably have something, but we'll look that up and make sure that that's
Okay.
defined. Senator Hicks, did you have a question?
Madam Chairman, when we work the bill, I've got some other cleanup.
All right,
If
that
that
sounds
amendment
good.
is adopted.
All right, all right. Further public testimony on this bill. Go ahead, whichever one makes it to the front first. It's a race. All right.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association again. And we are certainly supportive of this bill, all parts of it. And I believe generally of the amendment as well. The one question that arises in my mind, particularly in lieu of the changes to the bill, on page 2, beginning on line 21, states for subdivisions as defined, et cetera, the subdivider shall be responsible for the construction. Is that language mandating that anyone in a subdivision has to fence their subdivision? Or is it, I believe the intent is that if they choose to build a fence, that they have to pay for it. So I'm just wondering, or perhaps suggesting a slight amendment there to say the subdivider shall be responsible for the cost of construction and maintenance of a perimeter partition fence, so that there isn't the implication that we're imposing that as a burden on the subdivider.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Are there any questions for Mr. McGagno? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now a race from the back of the room.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation again. Much as my compadre with the stock grower, supporting the bill as presented and also supporting the amendment. If I haven't had a chance to really track everything through, but putting the burden of the fencing of a subdivision on the subdivider, I think is a good idea. And with that, ma'am, I will sit for any questions.
Any questions for Farm Bureau?
Thank you.
You're good to go. Thank you. All right. All right, committee. Is there anyone on Zoom? No one on Zoom. So I remembered to ask. All right. So, committee, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chair, Madam Chairman, is it your pleasure to work the amendment first or work the bill and then work the amendment into the bill?
I think we would need to move the bill and then we'll work the bill if we
Right.
want to move the bill.
I'll move the bill.
Moved by Senator Hicks, seconded by Senator Ide. We'll let him do it this time. All right, so then we'll go to amendments. We'll go ahead and go page by page. So are there any amendments on page 1?
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Senator Hicks.
we will have to come back and amend the title, assuming that the amendment, one of the other proposed amendments. So at this point in time, I don't have one until we dispose of some of the other provisions. So I would bring your attention to line 5,
Okay,
after the word livestock, where it says limiting the shared costs of a partition fence between the subdivider and an adjoining landowner. if subsequent amendments were to pass, that you would want to strike that out of the title of the bill.
Okay, we'll come back to that one then. All right. Are there any amendments on page 2?
Madam Chair.
Senator Ide.
I just have a question. Who made these penalty changes from $5 to $150 to $750? And I don't know how long that's been in place on the $5. It's more of a question than anything. Does anybody have any comments on those, those fines? Are they high, low? Should they stay the same? Just a question.
Thank you, Senator Ide. I think we'll ask some of the previous committee members that were here in the interim if they have any recollection of that. Senator Cole?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a very old penalty. I think it was in the early 1900s. I don't think they found the exact date, but they were very, very old and haven't been changed. And it was during the interim committee meeting where this discussion happened involving the LSO and our staff and the committee. That's how those numbers changed.
Any follow? All right, we're good to go. All right, so are there any amendments on page 2?
Madam Chairman,
Senator Hicks, please turn.
if I may help my colleague out. On page 2, line 23, after the, would insert cost of. And then after construction, insert the word and maintenance. So now that's going to read, the subdivider shall be responsible for the cost of construction and maintenance of a perimeter fence on any part of the subdivision.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, moved by Senator Hicks, seconded by Senator Cole. Linda, did you get that amendment or do you need us to repeat it?
I believe so.
Would you read it back to us, please?
So our third, page 2, 123, the cost of construction and maintenance of the perimeter portion fence on part of the subdivision adjacent to land. Is that what we need to change?
Yes, that is correct. All right, so everyone's clear on the amendment? Any discussion?
Question on the amendment.
Senator French?
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
did we run that language again, Senator Hicks?
Go ahead, Senator Hicks.
All right, so we'll start on line 22 after the statutory citation with the word the. So this will now read, the subdivider shall be responsible for the cost of construction, new language, and maintenance of a perimeter partition fence on any part, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Existing language.
Senator French?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Senator Hicks. Yeah, you incorporated what the stock growers had to. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, are we ready to vote on the amendment? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion to amend has been adopted. We are now on page 3. Are there any amendments on page 3?
Madam Chairman, page
Senator
3.
Cole?
Page 3, line 3, the word parties, strike the word parties and insert subdivider. I'll continue. And then after the word subdivider, after the period, strike in, and then take that down to line 9. If I get this right. Yeah, to line 9, to the end of line 9. Strike, and then line 10, from the beginning of line 10 to the word fence, period, strike all that language, and then we continue on by the adjoining landowner shall not be liable for any damages caused by.
Okay, do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
So moved by Kolb, seconded by French. Discussion on the amendment. Is there any discussion?
Question?
Questions being called on the amendment? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion to amend has passed.
Madam Chairman,
Senator Hicks,
with the adoption of that amendment, now we need to go back and amend that language out of the bill title. So on page 1, line 5, starting with limiting, strike the balance of that line. Strike all of line 6. And on line 7, strike through landowner.
okay, could I get a second on that?
Second.
Moved by Hicks, seconded by Cole. Linda, do you have that change?
Just if I can verify.
Yes, go
I
right ahead.
have, after limiting, to delete everything through landowner on line 7.
Correct.
Starting.
Did
and
you say
limiting.
limiting or livestock? Because livestock would be the last word and then we
Okay.
would start striking at limiting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion to amend has passed. Are there any other amendments on this bill? We kind of went back to page 1, we didn't go to page 4. Any other amendments? All right, any discussion on the bill? Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Senator Ide.
I'm familiar with a piece of land that is right next to a subdivision, and it's more of a comment than anything. I just wanted to make clear that I understand this as well, that this subdivision built their own fence. Basically, all the individual lot owners built their own fence, and it goes along the perimeter of another ag property right there. And then the ag property built their own, barbed wire fence with, basically off of the property line. So they lost a little bit of their property, but that's what they did. And I don't, just wanted to make sure that that's clear, that you can still do that. I mean, you can build your own fence if you want to outside of the subdivision fence. That's just a comment.
Thank you, Senator Ide, for making that clear for everyone listening today. All right, any further discussion? Seeing
Mr.
none.
Chairman,
Oh.
or Madam Chairman, I'll just bring
Senator
it
Hicks?
to the committee's attention because it's likely to come up on the floor. With the adoption of maintenance, there may be some discussion, because this is the way it's the way it's done now. And typically with the subdivision goes in, they go through a plat review with the county approves it. The subdivider sells those parcels off to another entity. And then that entity owns that property. The way this language is constructed in there, it puts the burden of the maintenance of that fence, the way I would read this, in perpetuity, back on the original subdivider. I understand the construction part of it. When they go through the actual subdivision review, and I'm fine, but I just think if we take this out on the floor, just be aware that might be an issue that arises as somebody presents the bill, and give it a little thought between now and then, so.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Senator Kolb, did you have?
Yeah, I would
Thought?
propose an amendment then to strike any reference to maintenance. I think the intent is for the subdivider who constructed said fence that they take care of the construction and maintenance of that structure. So I would propose we referring to page 3, line 8. Just strike the remainder of subdivider shall pay any additional cost. Let's see, I have it right, hang on.
Senator Kolb, I think the and maintenance was on page 2, line 23.
Over here.
that we just added? Is that what you want to take out, or are there two locations?
No, Madam Chair, I think page 2, line 23 I thought it was clear that the subdivider shall be responsible for the cost and construction
Of construction and
maintenance.
maintenance?
Of a perimeter partition fence on any part of that subdivision adjacent to lands upon which livestock can legally be run at large. So I think, we have a discussion, but I believe that's okay. In order to try to address Senator Hicks's concern that there's a part in here that still references maintenance cost.
And Madam Chairman, I don't have the statutes in front of me right now, but I'm trying to recollect from memory, but I think under our lawful fence statutes, there's a provision for the requirement for maintenance, but I do believe that's a shared requirement for maintenance on that.
Okay.
I'm just concerned that we're assigning maintenance to somebody that has sold the property. They've constructed the fence under the statutes, and they're responsible for that construction solely, fully, wholly, at their expense. Now we've said maintenance, they're responsible for any maintenance, which may not occur for years, and it may be a new owner of that. So, yeah, I think at this point in time, you can leave it anyway, but be prepared of the consequences of what that language says in that bill. So I guess at this point in time, I think it'd probably be prudent to remove the word and maintenance out of there.
Senator Hicks, is that in your amendment that you made to page 2? Or do you have it, do you see it in another place?
No, that's the only place I see it, Madam Chairman.
Would you like to make a motion to remove, Linda, we are back on page 2, line 23, considering removing and maintenance that we just inserted. And so Senator Hicks, are you making a motion to remove and maintenance?
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Senator Hicks, seconded by Senator French. We are removing and maintenance that we just inserted after construction on line 23 of page 2. Is there any discussion on this motion? Discussion. Seeing none.
Madam Chair,
Senator
about
Ide.
just wanted to make clear, because I like that change over here and maintenance. So you're saying it's covered over here on page 3, line 9. Is that where we're going with this? Is
Well,
what-
that language has all been, Madam Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Senator Ide, that language has all been stricken out, so that no longer exists.
We amended that.
I just think before we provide an explanation on this on the floor, we need to look at the existing statutes as it requires under the maintenance component and the liability. We could always bring a committee of the whole amendment to dress that up if we needed to, but I think this cleans it up a little better right now instead of saddling somebody with liability. And then we can do a little research between now and when it gets to the floor to make sure that maintenance is covered in the other components.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. I think that's good advice for our committee. So we'll go back and do a little more homework. We have 3 readings as it goes through the chamber that we'll have a chance to make sure we get this exactly right. So Linda, did you catch what the amendment was? Is everyone ready to vote on the amendment of removing and maintenance on page 2, line 23? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion to amend has passed. Did you get all of that, Linda?
I believe so, yes.
All right. Is there any further discussion on the bill as amended? Seeing none, we'll call the roll. Linda, would you please call the roll on lawful fences, Senate File 73?
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Hicks,
Aye.
Senator Ide,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
We have 5 ayes.
5 ayes, the bill passes, and Senator Kolb will carry this bill on the floor. He did such a good job Both he and Senator French, thank you so much for taking us through these bills tonight. With that, our meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting will be Thursday night upon adjournment, and we'll notice those bills as soon as we get them ready to go. So thank